So before we dive too deeply into understanding data and data governance and all of these technical terms or so-called technical terms, what I want us to do is really take a snapshot and an understanding of what is the state of data in business. Everybody's talking about data, but I think there's a couple of common problems, and that really lends itself to talking about how we can change how we approach this. If we don't understand what the problem of data is, then we're not going to be approaching it from the right perspective. And what we're going to look at here is we're going to look at some of those business problems around data, not around technical things, but how do we approach data and how are we using data to understand how we can solve this challenge. First of all, one thing that we can say about data, especially for businesses and for organizations, is that it has value. It's hard to kind of talk about that value, and we've got some more material, we'll run through that later, but everybody's talking about the value of data. We say the data is the new oil, data is the new uranium, data is the new something. But we can all acknowledge that data has value, and this is widely reported on. In fact, some organizations and some government organizations will actually report on their estimated value to the economy. So one of the things that we're all tackling with is we're handling this really valuable, highly volatile, very, very interesting asset, and we need to manage that better. The next challenge is that we're making more data than ever before. Everybody is a data analyst. There are data analysts coming out of the rafters. So more and more data is being generated, and this is being generated primarily by businesses. If you've ever onboarded at a new organization, you see something like this tweet where there's 4 or 5, 10, 20 different systems that we have to work with at work. We have Slack, we have Jira, we have HR systems, we have finance systems, and all of these have data. In fact, new reports are coming out that say that organizations have between 50 and 200 different SaaS platforms, each of which has their own data, each of which has their own reporting capability for different reporting lines. Ultimately, everybody's trying to collect data to be more efficient and to get more value from their clients, from their customers, and from the services that they deliver. So when we're all making data as fast as we are, we've got to keep on top of this better than ever. And not only are organizations making more data, but more people in the organizations are making data. So we talk about everybody being overwhelmed with data at work. We're seeing growth in data analysts where everybody's starting to pick up reporting tools. They're using Excel, they're using spreadsheets to generate data to try and understand what they're doing in their organization. Again, usually it comes from a point of a business line or a business unit trying to be more efficient. In fact, what we've seen is a growth in data science. We've seen a growth in data science positions in the market, and AI has only accelerated that. So in this graphic, we've only got it up to 2020, which means we haven't even captured the change in the job market from AI, where we're seeing more and more people handling data in different ways in the organization. So not only are we generating more data and we're having more people handling data, people are becoming more and more time poor. And what this means is that people have to prioritize what they do effectively. They need to do the best thing with the best outcome for their organization. And what that generally means is that we're seeing a slippage in data tasks. We're seeing people not really picking up the slack when it comes to those data hygiene, those data documentation, that data management, data governance. All these little things just fall to the wayside because we're focused on what we perceive to be more important high-value tasks. And what that means is that because we're not doing that, that early stage hygiene, data scientists are really taking the brunt of that, where we spend more time actually trying to find data and understand what that data is than actually producing analytics from it. So what you can see here is nearly 80% of time spent trying to facilitate a data request, trying to produce some new analytics, is mostly spent on low-value tasks. And that's finding what's available or cleaning it up when you get it. So what we need to do is shift some of that work earlier in the life cycle and say, hey, how can we make sure people are doing their part earlier on so we understand what our data means? This is coupled with the fact that the job market is becoming more and more competitive and people are staying in jobs for shorter periods of time. As you can see here, there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of news reports and statistics that show that people are staying in jobs for shorter periods of time. which means that we're no longer relying on organizational knowledge retention. We can't just rely on the fact that somebody knows this process, we just need to find them, because that somebody may have moved on. So documentation is becoming more critical now than ever. If we don't get a handle on this, then we're not going to be able to maintain that knowledge over time, and eventually we're going to lose the ability to use our own analytics. What we also see is that organizations are trying to adopt to the fact that because people are staying for shorter periods of time, what we're seeing is younger workers are really relying on training. They're really relying on industry standards and industry-wide knowledge, because if I'm only staying at a job for 4 years, I don't want to learn a process that's only applicable at that job. I want to learn something that I can carry with me through my career. If the training at my organization is really only focused on how they do things there, if it doesn't help me progress through my career, people are much more reluctant to pick it up. So what we need to do is adapt our training to make sure that it is something that it can follow a person through their career. If we don't do that, we don't get that engagement, and we run the risk of, again, continuing to have that knowledge retention problem in our organization. So that's the state of the world today. We've got more data, it's more valuable, we've got more people doing it, but people aren't staying around for as long as they used to. So what we're seeing is a challenge where we're trying to engage with people who are very busy, but they're moving jobs, they're not documenting their information, and we're ending up in an environment where data governance is the last activity that people pick up. So what we need to do is we need to change how we approach this for our organizations. We need it to be accessible. If business areas are creating data, we need them to take an active role in documenting the data they have. If people are moving more frequently, we need knowledge to be transferable so they can have the skills they need to work with them across their career. We can't just teach them a framework that's only applicable at one organization, because they're going to have a very surface level engagement, and if they see that, then they're not going to really dive deep and really try to solve this problem, really make it an intrinsic part of their job. The other thing is that we need to make sure that this generates quick wins. This is a really important process in the MAST methodology, is we need to do things that iteratively improve the organization over time, because we need to make sure people see this as valuable. It can't be a massive transformation. It needs to be something small and achievable so we can solve a problem and continue to improve the organization. And these are the core principles of what the MAST methodology is all about, is developing a tool so that people can adopt that toolkit, adopt that framework, so they have skills they can use wherever they go, regardless of the tools they use, so that they can really feel like they're achieving the organization's goals, really feel like they're doing data better, really feel like they can see how what they're doing is making a difference for the organization.